Spray from the midnight tide jeweled Nerissa's shoulders as she surfaced beyond the jagged rocks of Marrow Point. The moan of the sea dragged backward into the caverns, while the lighthouse above cast its white eye across the water. Tonight, the beam pulsed in an odd rhythm. 2 short flashes, a pause, a long one, that clashed with every maritime code Nerissa knew. Her notebook, cut from kelp vellum and sealed with shellac, bobbed in a watertight pouch near her hip. She had spent the last 3 hours drawing the latest sprawl of Noctiluca colonies, the bioluminescent algae that washed onto Marrow Point's narrow shelf every spring. Their turquoise sparks appeared weaker this season. Whole pockets of shoreline that should have been lit, like a carnival, were fading to dull ash. Nerissa suspected pollution or illegal dredging, but each hypothesis faltered under scrutiny. The lighthouse itself had begun behaving strangely. For 140 years, the lantern of Marrow Point had kept steady rotation, its machinery wound by clockwork and salted wind. But 6 weeks ago, the pattern changed. Erratic intervals, sporadic blackouts, eerie red prisms in place of the usual crystal white. Sailors whispered of smugglers signaling through the tower. Nerissa needed access inside. The keeper, Captain Rowan Eldridge, would have been amenable. He'd given her a bronze key last year when he retired to the mainland. But he'd sold the deed to a mechanic named Elias Quill, who immediately barred entry to everyone. Even the coastal rangers only got as far as his iron gate. He released them with spare sentences and a mechanic's smile polished to dull brass. As Nerissa flicked water from her fins and climbed onto a rock, she rehearsed her overture. She carried letters of introduction from 3 universities, none of which knew she was technically half fish, in a bundle of analysis jars. In theory, that should have sufficed. In practice, people's reactions when she presented herself fully tended to split: fascination, disgust, or worse, opportunistic curiosity. While she rehearsed, a second beam sliced low across the tide pools. Nerissa ducked instinctively and realized the flash hadn't come from the lantern room above, but from the foot of the tower. Lantern light from a handheld lamp. Someone was walking the breakers. She eased behind a pillar of basalt, only her eyes above the foam. The figure strode with deliberate cadence, stopping every 10 paces to angle the lamp downward. At each pause, he poured a thin spill of liquid onto the rocks. When the lamp's glow fell on his profile, Nerissa saw the unmistakable silhouette. Elias Quill, the new keeper, the reclusive mechanic, staking the shoreline with a fluid that steamed white where it touched seawater. He was poisoning the coast, the fraying Noctiluca colonies, the dimming spark along the beaches. They weren't suffering from random contamination. Someone was deliberately killing them. Nerissa's pulse flicked in her throat. She should confront him now, but there was an old proverb in the Abyssal clans: ask first what the monster guards. Elias might be the monster, or merely its caretaker. Either way, she needed information. She slid underwater, fins slicing silent momentum, and followed his lamp from a safe distance. The next afternoon, she approached the tower openly. Shifting from tail to feet on a hidden shoal, she donned waterproof trousers and a suede coat whose cuffs concealed the scale seams along her wrists. The wind smelled of rust and wet kelp. A chain-link gate barred the winding stair that climbed the bluff. A bronze placard: no admittance without appointment. Nerissa rapped once with a shell hammer. From somewhere overhead came metallic clangs, as if a giant clock were reassembling itself. Finally, a hatch slid open beside the gate, and Elias Quill peered down. Copper goggles perched on his forehead. His eyes behind them were pale, nearly silver. "Close tide for visitors," he said. I'm Nerissa Lorne, she answered, marine ecologist. Your predecessor granted me observational access last year. I'm mapping this season's Noctiluca bloom. Bloom looks sparse. His gaze flicked toward the sea behind her. Nothing worth observing. Precisely why it's worth observing, she said. He studied her, then the satchel at her hip. Not today, he concluded, and began to shut the hatch. I saw you last night, she said quickly, pouring something onto the rocks. He froze. Nerissa tried to keep her voice even. If you're testing experimental solvents, they're interfering with the algae's photocytes. Those algae are vital to the coastal food chain. Cod larvae feed on the microfauna that feed on the Noctiluca. If the bloom fails, your lighthouse will overlook a dead sea. Then ships will sail quieter, he murmured. A smile ghosted across his mouth, but it vanished before it finished forming. Come back tomorrow, he said. Sunset. Bring a torch and keep silent about what you saw. The hatch slammed. The gate unlocked with a buzz. Nerissa stepped onto the stair as the mechanism rebolted behind her with mechanical finality. Elias awaited her on the gallery platform that ringed the lantern room. A horizon of bruised purple clouds smothered the last tangerine light. He handed her a brass torch whose flame burned green. The only color Noctiluca recognizes, he said. He led her down a spiral of service ladders beneath the lighthouse proper, deeper than Nerissa guessed the rock could allow. The walls sweated brine. The air smelled of old storms. They emerged into a cavern lit by static waves of turquoise, an underground lagoon where tens of millions of bioluminescent algae drifted in hypnotic constellations. Nerissa's breath caught. They're still alive. Barely. Elias crouched at a pump console. I siphon fresh colonies before the shoreline can contaminate them. You protected them? She managed. Then what were you pouring last night? A neutralizer. He rotated a valve. The lagoon brightened, reflecting in metallic ripples across his jawline. Fisher Consortium dredges these waters 3 miles out, dumps diesel and bilge along the Cape under cover of darkness. They pay taxes to none and bribes to all. I've tried every petition, every ranger. No one hears. So I designed something they can't ignore. He flicked a lever. A hollow clank echoed. The seawall at one end of the cavern parted like gills. Tonight the bloom goes home, he said. The lagoon water surged into a tunnel angled toward open sea. Nerissa realized the magnitude. He planned to flood the coast with captive algae, suddenly hyperbioluminescent. The glow, so bright it could be seen from orbit, would outline every illegal vessel in radiant blue. Satellites, Coast Guard, even civilian drones would notice. Smugglers would lose their invisibility blanket. It's brilliant, she whispered. It's sabotage, he corrected, though a smile tugged stubbornly. I just need the lantern's mirrors aligned so the beam coordinates with the plume. Otherwise, fishermen will claim Aurora Borealis and keep plundering. Will you help? She hesitated. Why trust me? I told you to return, and you did. That's rarer than honesty. The plan required 3 steps. First, release a controlled pulse of bloom water, precisely as the consortium's tankers crossed the Cape. Second, rotate the lighthouse lens to strobe a coded alert visible to satellites. Third, survive the probable retaliation. They synchronized watches. High tide peaked at 2:37. Nerissa calibrated the lagoon sluice while Elias climbed into the lantern room to refocus prisms. Through a hatch in the floor, she watched gears spin under his hands. Quick, deft, unerringly certain. The suspicion that had dogged her since first seeing him pour liquid now inverted into fascination. Why did Captain Eldridge retire so abruptly? She asked while tightening a flange. He saw charts, Elias called back. Bathymetric scans showing reef collapse. He couldn't watch the death. Sold me the tower for a single coin. Told me to resurrect what I could. Are you a mechanic or a priest? I build contraptions. He glanced through the grating. Resurrection is up to you scientists. They shared a brief grin between metal rungs. At Aura 122, Nerissa slipped out the service door to scout the shoreline. The moon dripped silver nets across the waves. On the horizon, 3 black hulls crawled toward the cape. Lights extinguished. Perfect timing. She swam close enough to read their registration numbers with her mermaid eyes, names scraped off, identifiers painted black. She trailed them until certain they aimed straight for Marrow Point's cove. Returning, she found Elias kneeling beside the lagoon's main valve, shoulders hunched as if wrestling with invisible weight. "Cold feet?" she asked, wringing water from her braid. "Second-guessing the dose," he admitted. "Too little glow, and we go unnoticed. Too much, and we bleach the reefs." Nerissa laid a webbed hand atop his. "I'll calculate." She studied the algae's density, whispered arithmetic, then twisted the valve exactly 7 degrees. "Trust the numbers." He exhaled, stood. "Then let's anger some pirates." EU-230. The sluice groaned. A white turquoise river poured into the sea tunnels, racing outward beneath the beach. Nerissa and Elias climbed the spiral to the lantern gallery. Wind tore at their coats. Lightning flared far off. Elias reclamped second-order Fresnel lenses into a new array, rotating the entire carriage by hand. Nerissa keyed a telegraph lever that activated an antique arc lamp. The beam now flashed in a trinary pattern that spelled SOS in maritime code, followed by coordinates. Above them, wartime signaling mirrors, obsolete since satellites, tilted skyward to repeat the pattern in broader strokes. Downslope, water boiled electric blue as the bloom surged into open current. Lines of fire traced every ripple, outlining the consortium's vessels in ghostly halos. On deck, sailors shouted panicked oaths. Several switched on spotlights to search the water, only illuminating their predicament further. The ships looked as if mythic sea creatures had lassoed them in living neon. Nerissa laughed, an unguarded tidal sound that startled her. "Look at them flail!" "Check the Coast Guard frequency," Elias said. She pressed a headphone shell to her ear. Already chatter spilled through. Unidentified luminous event, triangulating, dispatch aerial reconnaissance. Excitement crackled like static. They had succeeded, almost. One final hazard remained. A drone of engines climbed the bluff road, black jeeps with floodlights. Elias shaded his eyes. "Consortium's land squad. They'll want to know how we outed them." Nerissa pivoted. "We can escape through the service shaft into the sea." Elias shook his head. "If they seize the tower, they can spin a new story. We need to preserve the instruments, or everything resets tomorrow." He sprinted inside, descending toward the mechanics bay. Nerissa swore softly and followed. They barricaded the ground floor hatch with anchor chains. Flames of blue continued sweeping across the windows as bloom water lapped the foundations. Outside, boots crunched gravel. A bullhorn. "Lighthouse occupants! Come out and power down the beam!" Elias flicked a switch. Deep within the walls, capacitors hummed. Backup generators. Even if they cut the main grid, lenses stay locked. 2 hours minimum battery. "You planned this level of retaliation?" Nerissa asked, half awed, half exasperated. "I learned pessimism from the sea." He handed her a copper coil. "Ever wire explosives? I specialize in ecology, not mayhem." "Same difference." He pointed her toward the diesel tanks that heated the keeper's quarters. "Reroute feed valves. If they breach the door, ignite. Won't kill them, just scare them stiff." Sirens approached from opposite direction now. Legitimate Coast Guard. Timing would be tight. Hold until law arrived, then stand down. Outside, a blowtorch roared. Metal glowed cherry, where consortium men sliced the hinges. Elias crouched by the fail-safe lever, hands steady. Nerissa struggled with copper couplings slippery with salt. She pressed her wrist and scales rippled forth. Claws extended enough to slash the line. Diesel sprayed into a catch basin. A thud. The door buckled. Another. Hinges shrieked. Then a flash grenade clattered through the gap, landing between Elias and Nerissa. Reflex took over. Nerissa scissored her tail to curl around the device, then hurled it back through the gap just before it detonated outside, stunning the intruders instead. The reprieve lasted seconds. 4 armed figures surged in. Elias yanked the lever. Diesel vapors whooshed into ignition, blossoming a wall of orange heat that forced the men backward. None were harmed, save scorched pride. Sirens wailed closer. Nerissa peered through smoke. A Coast Guard cutter's lights chopped through the gloom offshore. Helicopters thumped overhead. Consortium jeeps reversed down the bluff, tires spinning gravel. Retreat. Elias finally allowed himself to sag against a bulkhead. Salt-rimed sweat traced his cheek. Nerissa, still half-scaled, leaned beside him. Blue light from the algae outside painted them celestial. "Charges?" he asked. "Wires holding," she replied. "Tanks sealed. We're clear." He nodded, chin dropping. "Then we've done it." Dawn found them on the gallery, breathing fog that smelled faintly of victory and diesel. Below, uniformed investigators escorted consortium captains in cuffs. News drones hovered, devouring footage of glowing ships. The sea itself remained alight, but already dilution dimmed the brilliance. Soon it would settle to normalcy, leaving nothing but data archives and satellite images impossible to refute. Nerissa traced condensation on the railing. "The Noctiluca will disperse by tonight. Populations should recover inside the cavern for next year if we treat them with care." "We," Elias echoed. "Stay then. Help me steward the lagoon. I could use a researcher who knows resurrection." She eyed him sidelong. "And I could use a mechanic who knows sabotage." The horizon flared coral where sun touched water. She let her tail slip full, bronze scales catching dawn. "I won't hide what I am." "Good," he said simply. "The sea's greatest marvels can't live in hiding forever." They spent the following week drafting joint statements for ecological councils, while agents seized consortium assets. During downtimes, Nerissa documented algae growth curves. Elias repaired burned circuitry. They argued amiably about lens ratios, about the ethics of vigilante science, about where a mermaid might prefer her workstation. She won the argument, a tide pool lab carved near the cavern entrance. One night, weeks after the Bloom revolt, Nerissa awoke to find Elias absent from his cot. Memories of first seeing him pour liquid returned. She padded upstairs. The lantern was dark, but outside on the breakers, a solitary lamp swayed. Heart quickening, she slipped into the surf and followed. She found him kneeling over a tide pool, using a dropper to release microscopic larvae. Eelgrass crabs, not poison. The crabs grazed harmful fungi that decimated coastal seagrass. He started when she surfaced. "Couldn't sleep," he confessed. "Figured I'd do something useful." Nerissa watched the crabs scuttle, leaving clean trails upon the grass. "Secrets again," she teased. "Habits," he corrected. "Old solitude dies slowly." She threaded her fingers through his. "Then let's give it something brighter to contend with." They returned to the lighthouse together, lamp held between them. Above, the tower loomed not as a fortress, but as a heart valve, cycling pulses of possibility through the night. Summer matured. Tourists arrived. drawn by tales of the ghostlit armada and the mermaid scientist of Marrow Point. Some swore they saw her dolphin across moonlit coves. Others claimed she was only a publicity myth. Nerissa gave public lectures in ankle-length skirts and open sandals, scales glinting where sun met skin. She spoke of plankton, of light, of responsibility. Cameras flashed. Donations poured into marine conservation. Elias avoided the podium, but developed holographic exhibits that let visitors dive into the subterranean lagoon. His suspicious routines faded, replaced by scheduled moon calibrations, announced on the tower bulletin board so he could work undisturbed. Still, Nerissa sometimes accompanied him at odd hours, carrying a flask of spiced tea while he realigned gear trains. She found solace in the clockwork rhythm. He found comfort in her wordless hum echoing the surf. One evening, lightning prowled again across distant swells. Nerissa leaned over the gallery rail, hair whipping. "Storm will test our new sluice gates," she said. Elias tightened a screw, wiped grease on his sleeve. "They'll hold. I had a good partner on the design." "You had too," she corrected, nodding toward the sea. Out beyond the reef, turquoise halos winked as if the algae themselves approved. He followed her gaze. "When the lantern first blinded me as a child, I thought it was alive. A great eye watching to be sure I amounted to something." "And did you?" "I'm working on it," he said. Then shy but earnest, "Stay long enough and maybe confirm." She placed her kelp notebook in his pocket. "My research log," she told him, "with amendments for us both. Proof I'll stay long enough to keep writing." Lightning cracked. As thunder rolled, the lantern ignited in flawless rotation, a steadiness won through midnight tinkering, clandestine conspiracy, and unlikely fellowship. And far below, where the tide kissed basalt, millions of tiny lights sparked in unison, rising and falling like heartbeats beneath the guardian tower that would never again stand alone.